Hello and welcome to IRI Growth Insights C-Suite Conversations. I'm John McIndoe, your host and Chief Marketing Officer here at IRI. IRI integrates big data, predictive analytics, and forward-looking insights to help companies in the CPG, retail, healthcare, and media markets grow their businesses. We also share our thought leadership with the industry at large with the goal of addressing and tackling key challenges in our industry. Our special C-Suites Conversation series features notable leaders talking about the future of CPG and retail. In this special episode, we're joined by Ram Krishnan, Global Chief Commercial Officer for PepsiCo. It's amazing actually that Ram has time for us today as he oversees PepsiCo's global commercial organization, which includes global R&D, marketing and insights, customer strategy, revenue management, go-to-market, e-commerce, and design. That's a lot. Additionally, Ram works with PepsiCo's CEO to transform and scale the company's commercial, data, and digital capabilities. Ram has been with PepsiCo for more than 14 years, so he brings to us today a wealth of experience, including leading PepsiCo's APAC region to his current role. In his limited spare time, we also know that Ram has hosted the Ramalytics blog since early 2015. Here he muses on such diverse topics as marketing strategies, inspiration, behavioral economics, Shenzhen, China's maker culture, AI's influence on innovation, and how technology enables experiences. I see some of his engineering background at play here as well. Leading the conversation today with Ram is KK Deve, President of Strategic Analytics here at IRI. KK has been leading the IRI COVID-19 thought leadership and economic indicators initiatives, which are among other invaluable resources you can access at iriworldwide.com. With that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to KK and Ram.
Thank you, John. Ram, I've enjoyed working with you over the past decade on various topics. You're very smart, thoughtful, respectful, and humble. I'm excited to discuss global CPG and retail trends with you today and to learn how a large global manufacturer like PepsiCo is navigating through the pandemic. Welcome, Ram. I feel that John's introduction of you gave us some clues into who you are outside of being a senior executive at a large CPG company. But I would like our viewers and listeners an opportunity to learn a little more about you as a person. Which book are you reading these days, Ram?
I just finished a book, KK, called Sisu, which is the Finnish art of courage. It's all about the Finnish culture and how they use guts and perseverance to overcome great obstacles. So it's been something I didn't know a whole lot about, something that we need in this world day and today. So it's been a great learning about this Finnish art of courage, Sisu. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right.
Seems like a right book at the right time. Which gadget or new technology has captivated you, Ram?
I'll tell you, it's interesting, what's been interesting going from what I would consider BC to AD, before COVID to after distancing. Really more than, it's been the app ecosystem and the social ecosystem, how it's evolved. I mean, there are a lot of things which are wrong about the social media world, but what's been amazing is how certain social media tools are bringing people together virtually. I got to tell you, I'm a big fan of this house party that I've discovered through my family. We were getting ready to celebrate a milestone birthday party for my father-in-law, and we did this virtually. And I actually thought it was better than the live event because more people could join. There's an app that I discovered called Quarantine Buddy, where you get to do activities with other people with common interest. So it's been fascinating how this virtual socialization has taken off.
That's interesting. And what new behavior have you adopted during COVID-19? And do you think it'll stick? AD?
That's a good question. Obviously, I think it takes a sustained period of trial before a habit sticks. But I'm hoping this is one that I can practice rest of my life. And it's simple, this notion of giving gratitude. I think we're all, are privileged enough to be in a position where we should be thankful. So one of the things I've started to do is every single day find, at least one thing that I'm grateful for, and make sure I pass that on to somebody else. And towards the end of the day, we do this exercise as a family about writing down what are the 3 things we're grateful for as a family. So I think I'm hoping that's something that sticks with me as we get to a new normal.
It's wonderful, wonderful. Ram, I'm going to switch to your leadership style, and would love to kind of understand what have you learned, during this COVID crisis in terms of your own leadership, and what has worked well, and what would you say is something that is still in work in progress that you'll improve upon?
No, as you can imagine, KK, I think almost all of us as individuals and leaders have grown through this crisis, right? And there's a great deal of learning. As I reflect on it, it's interesting. There are 2, cultural DNA elements that PepsiCo values, and we cultivate in our leaders. One is moving empowerment. The other is moving with decisiveness. The good news is those 2 things have served us well during this crisis. I reflect on my time leading the China business when the pandemic hit. It takes us 6 months to come up with an annual operating plan. And over a period of 72 hours, we redid the annual operating plan across the entire value chain from make, move, sell, and market. And we made big changes to big things. And that resulted in exponential growth as we exited the crisis. So that's I think that's a good learning. It's reinforced, what we value at PepsiCo, and that served us well. As I reflect on what we could do better, I think we've all underestimated the psychological impact of the pandemic to individuals. This notion of how people are feeling, how are they doing day to day? I think in the past, we don't talk about feelings in workplace. And I think that's one of the things I wish, we had known intuitively as something we should be doing and not waiting for a crisis. So that's something I'm hoping to, learn and apply as I move along as a leader.
Very, very interesting. And thank you for sharing that, Ram. Now we're going to turn over to PepsiCo, right? PepsiCo is one of the largest food and beverage CPG manufacturer in the world. And clearly you've started talking a little bit about the planning that moved fast. But what are some of the things that you as an organization have done to kind of seize the opportunities that were presented because of COVID?
Yeah, so we look at, we've looked at opportunities through 3 vectors. One, obviously, through the lens of the consumer. So if you think about it in this new norm, the consumer context is changing, the consumer routines are changing. So at home and from home is becoming very important. So the product usage occasions and how they engage with brands is changing. So with that, we're looking at opportunities of how do we pivot our product portfolio and communication to leverage this opportunity. So that's through the angle of the consumer. The second vector is through the lens of channel. As you can imagine, at IRI, you know this very well, it's been striking to see how dramatically the channel shifting is happening and then resettling. So we think a continuous period of disruption between the next 6, 12, and 18 months. There, our focus is staying very nimble and agile to recognize these channel shifts. To give you an idea, across some markets, we've seen $100 to $200 billion move from away from home channel, as an example, into retail, right? So how are we positioned with our supply chain and go-to-market execution to take advantage of that? So that's a big area of focus. The second thing commercially we're looking at is we're all learning there's some value in simplification and being thoughtful on where we add complexity to unlock granular growth. So we're looking at that. The third vector we're looking at outside of consumer and channel is capability, and really commercial capability. We already had a roadmap in place. We already had a roadmap last year as we talked about how the consumer and channel landscape is going to change. We had laid out a roadmap of how we're going to evolve commercial capabilities. we had to revisit the roadmap and figure out which ones are we going to accelerate, which one are going to decelerate, and which one are we going to create new. So that's something we're maniacally focused on as far as a commercial roadmap to evolve with the consumer and changing retail.
And what risks are you seeing, Ram, right, in terms of the marketplace, and what are you trying to do to mitigate those risks?
One risk is just the risk of moving slowly. I think you have to be very agile to take advantage of it. I just talked about the fact there's billions of dollars shifting every 3 to 6 months. You know our planning cycle. We are used to planning 12, 18 months, 24 months in advance. Now you have to plan in horizons of 30, 60, and 90 days and be nimble, because what you can't hypothesize is what's happening yesterday. You can't forecast out that that's going to be the reality for the full year. So I think the ways of planning and being nimble, resource allocation that goes along with these decisions, because we've been very slow historically on changing resources based on what we're seeing. And I think we need to be much more purposeful in moving resources around, be it in media dollars, promotional dollars, or even with the G&A. So we're looking at those two vectors to make sure we're staying abreast as these things change.
And that's tough for a large organization that's sprawled across the entire globe with multiple product lines, right? So,
well, you know what, KK, it's interesting actually. You know, what's been fascinating is the speed of decision making has accelerated during this pandemic. Because frankly, none of us have time to sit around talking about things in multiple levels and then making decisions. I got to tell you, as a leadership team, I think we've come together well, and we've started to move with real speed. And now we're trying to figure out how do we hang on to the speed and don't go back to the the regular way. So in some ways, I think we feel like our handcuffs are off on the regular processes of what a traditional CPG company has followed. And the goal now is to try to make sure it's indoctrinated into our culture and we don't lose this.
Yeah, no, I think you have been talking about that for a while. I mean, everybody in CPG has been kind of saying, hey, we need to become more like Silicon Valley and move faster, fail fast, et cetera, et cetera. Glad to hear PepsiCo is kind of charging ahead on that. Ram, I'm going to ask a slightly different question. PepsiCo has $23 billion brands globally across most eating occasions and demand spaces, right? So what are some of the brand marketing changes and challenges you're seeing, and how are you responding? I mean, clearly it's a plus from an in-home consumption perspective, has elevated in-home consumption, but you have a portfolio of brands. How are you managing that? And with no sports, and you relied a lot on sports marketing. So just would love to kind of hear more about it. And for the audience, Ram used to be the CMO at Frito-Lay a few jobs ago, right? So Ram is intrinsically a marketer at heart. So with that, Ram.
No, happy to. What's been interesting is we had a chance to look back at previous pandemics like SARS and MERS. And I think our learning there is there are 4 distinct stages the consumer goes through as they go through this pandemic, right? Initially is preparation and prevention. The second is confinement and cocoonment. Third is restricted recovery. And fourth is this notion of return to normal. I think the big thing for us is to make sure our brands are evolving with the consumers as they go through these stages. So we're being very purposeful in thinking through what is the role of our brand in each of the stage. Because the last thing you want to do is to create disruption to an already challenging time for our consumers. So to your point, things we used to do pre-pandemic, or questioning, how does that work? You talked about sporting events. By the way, we're big into a lot of experiential marketing. We're at, we created events like South by Southwest and music festivals. But now we've gone to this world of physical distancing, but virtual socialization. So we're now relooking what is the role of our brands in this virtual world. I'll give you an idea. Early on, I remember in China, we pivoted the role of Gatorade and how Gatorade can actually help a consumer run an entire marathon in their own apartment. So it's, it's something we wouldn't have thought about, right? Gator, it's all about the big sporting events. So similarly, we're looking at how do our snacks play a role in meals. So really thinking through both our product usage and our brand communication as the consumer goes through these different stages of dealing with this crisis.
Ram, you recently launched two direct-to-consumer websites, pantryshop.com and then snacks.com. And I've shopped both of them, and I find them very, very useful. What is the intent here from a PepsiCo perspective?
Well, first I'll start by saying thank you for your business. Hopefully you'll continue to do more of it. First and foremost, our retailers will continue to be the primary manner by which we serve our consumers. Right? This, at the end of the day, it's a small niche offering. And the goal was, it was opportunistic. It was opportunistic because we saw a big demand spike and consumers are having a hard time accessing the product. So one of the things we wanted to test is the digital capabilities that we have built in-house. So we gave ourselves a challenge. In 30 days, could we set up this direct-to-consumer sites, all using internal technology, data scientists, software engineers, the marketing automation capabilities we have built, and challenge ourselves to basically create this direct-to-consumer business. And that's what they turned out to be. Our teams are able to rise up to the challenge and put up these two sites in a period of 30 days, end-to-end operational, all the way through supply chain execution, fulfillment of the product. The goal now is, how do you use this direct consumer connection that we have to have a conversation about how their needs are evolving, what kind of data can we collect so that we can be more conscious of our innovation pipeline. What do we think about promotional offerings, bundling, future offerings that we would actually take into actual retail outlets. So we're hoping this becomes a test lab. In your words, it's creating our own IRI panel without paying you guys, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at, is how does this become, it helps us do a lot of stuff directly with the consumers and learn. It becomes a lab.
Interesting. So it's like your own basis, if you will. Launch a product, test it out if necessary, etc., etc. That's great. And how are the retailers reacting? So far, so good?
Yeah, no, I think the retailers, I think we've been clear that we see this as a very small niche offering, right? And it's mostly to inform and educate how we can serve the retailers better, right? Imagine now I'm much more educated on what kind of assortments I could offer, what kind of multi-pack offerings I can bring in. And I could do this and test it in a virtual, fast failure mode versus trying to put this through a complicated supply chain, which is going to be an incredible cost for both us and the retailers. So I think for most part, the retailers are supportive because they see this as a test and learn that, by the way, we're going to apply at scale in their retail context.
Yeah, you have always innovated in that area. The neuroscience lab in Plano, in Dallas, you used to have, et cetera, et cetera. So you've always invested in these kinds of initiatives that provide you a competitive advantage. So congratulations on that. Your retail partners see PepsiCo as a company at forefront of insights, offering very high value-added insights, best-in-class execution, in-store execution, et cetera, as we see that in the Kantar, consistent high ratings in the Kantar Power Ranking. How do you maintain this edge? What are some of the things that you're doing? What lessons would others can take from this, right? From PepsiCo? Got it.
Well, one of our top priorities as a company, really through our entire 55-year history, has been operational excellence. And we measure our operational excellence through two lenses. One is precision, and the second is closed loop measurement. And I think that's basically our value proposition to our retailers that we bring. And we're thankful that our work has been recognized by our retail partners. But as you very well know, KK, excellence is a never-ending pursuit. So almost every month, every quarter, every year, we invest in new technology and data tools to make sure we can execute with precision and we can close the loop on our execution, right? I'll give you a couple of examples of over the last couple of years, the tools that we have developed. Probably one of the proprietary tools that we're incredibly proud of as far as impact has been this suite of tools called PepsCo's. And the PepsCo's sits on two different data sets. One is a consumer DNA data set and a store DNA, which is powered by a lot of our first-party data. And this has enabled us to create some digital products like Personalizer. And what the Personalizer does is it basically is a customized tool which creates customized messaging to the consumers based on what they're interested in on innovation, product promotion, innovation. Imagine that particular Personalizer tool is coupled with one other tool, which is one of my favorite, called the Most Valuable Store. That tool actually tells you where exactly is the shopper going to go into which physical store and shop for that particular product, right? So then we're able to work with our retail partners and curate the assortment, the merchandising, and the presentation. So you create this entire loop where you create demand through personalized offering. Then you offer the assortment to the consumers as they get into their store outlet, and then you close the loop. So I think that's the power of kind of the proposition that we would like to bring to our retail partners. And that's partly why we've been successful.
It may be self-serving, but I'll ask you this question. You've always been a very consumer-centric leader. What are some of the tools and data and insights that you turn to, Ram? I know you've already outlined a variety of them, but what are some of the more broader things that you turn to?
Well, since you're self-serving, KK, I'll start with our partnership with IRI. First, I wanted to congratulate both you and the IRI team. Obviously, we have announced publicly that we have renewed our partnership with IRI, and we're incredibly proud and excited to do that. And part of the rationale for the continued partnership that we've had is this partnership we have had and the co-investments we made with technology, automation, and data analytics, right? And I think about, I go back to the unified platform. Hopefully, IRI would say we were one of the first custodians of the technology and forefront of using the tool. And that continues to be till today. It's one of the tools I wake up every Monday morning with, looking at our performance, at least here in North America, right? But since that time, we've also built some proprietary tools in-house. On the front end consumer insight side, we have a tool called 360 Always On. It's basically a social listening tool, but it does more than that. It looks at blog sites, it looks at various trending topics. And the neat thing is it's got an AI component to it, which basically puts a value to say, is this trending topic sustainable, or this is a boom and splat? So that's a tool that we value. The other tool that I'm personally passionate about is a tool called ADA. Again, it does front-end insights, and it does everything from concept testing to testing consumer messaging. You can imagine during this COVID crisis, we had a lot of creative communication that we had to completely redo in a short period of time. And with this ADA tool, you're able to test messaging and get an answer in a very cost-efficient way in 48 hours. So we're able to make dramatic changes to our communication plan across a lot of our brands. So those would be some of the tools I would highlight.
Thank you, Ram. And thank you on behalf of IRI also for the great partnership we have had for at least 2-3 decades now. And everyone at IRI is always very excited to be pushing on the frontier with PepsiCo and very committed to PepsiCo. So thank you for the renewal of our partnership. Switching gears to your previous role, you're most recently the CEO of Asia Pacific, Australia, New Zealand, and China APAC. And some of the key practices, particularly in China, like the use of WeChat, right? I think you have written about. Just talk to, I know it's a sensitive topic these days, but just talk about how that kind of an application can help in US, the marketing of brands and products.
I'll start by just, talking about kind of my typical day when I was living in China, right? I'd get up in the morning, check my social media feed. I would use the same app to do a video conferencing with my work colleagues. I'd use the same app to order green tea from downstairs. I would use the same app to get a cab to go to dinner. I'd use the same app to buy the plane tickets for my vacation coming up, and use the same app to make an appointment with the doctor, pay my utility bills, all of my utility bills, and order grocery, all without leaving that one app ecosystem. Imagine having, that kind of, experience here in the US or in Western world. It's incredibly difficult because you got to go through different ecosystems to do everything. There, I used to tell a lot of my friends back here in the US, I could live my life using WeChat. I didn't need anything else. You didn't need credit cards, all of that stuff. Right? So I think what I'm seeing is, for sure, consumers out here in Europe and in US are going to demand that seamless experience. The question is, how is that delivered? I think you're going to see more and more of these app ecosystems and platforms coming together so that it's incredibly transparent to the consumer experience, right? And it's been fascinating. I've been out of the country for 3 years, and I'm back here. I remember when I was leaving the country, there was a big push towards unbundling, right? You didn't want to have your own cable TV. You wanted to get all this on demand, right?
Yeah.
But think about now the amount of choices you have. You have paradox of choices on all of this viewing. So I personally think there's now going to be a push towards more bundling coming on. And I think as that happens, more of these experiences will become more seamless. I think that'll probably be my takeaway from what I saw in the East. Very interesting. In fact, last night, our family, we watched the QB videos, right? The Fugitive or something, 10-minute videos. So, it's amazing the amount of choices we have these days and the amount of choices you as a marketer have to reach us. I mean, this was an ad-supported thing that we were seeing a lot of commercials. Ram, you have also moved some of the advertising and marketing in-house, right? And I think that's a trend that we see with a number of other CPG manufacturers. Retailers are also increasing the importance of their media platforms. How do you see all of these things coexisting, and where does the rubber meet the road, if you will, in terms of how you reach your consumers in this highly fragmented world, like QB to Kroger Media to other media services, and to your own in-house marketing and the wall gardens of Google and Facebook, et cetera, et cetera? Let me start with ourselves and what our intention is. Our intention is basically to move what I would consider essential data and analytics capability in-house, because in the long term, we see that as a competitive advantage that we want to in-house. Really, that's our first and foremost. Our intent is value creation versus productivity, right? And it's focused around owning that relationship with the consumer. And you think about some of the things that we have insourced. I'll give you some example. Creative testing. Okay. Yeah. I told you previously we used to outsource it. It took days to get the same answer back. Our media ROI, this is one of my favorite topics. For the longest time, we outsourced media ROI, and we used to do media ROI twice a year on a big brand, once a year on a smaller brand, and it wasn't real time at all. Now we have insourced and built those models in-house, so you could almost react real time to the changes that we're seeing. So which you think is puts us at it gives us a big competitive advantage. So that's what we're focused on, is we're looking for places where there's high value creation involved by moving that capability in-house. So that's the lens through which we're looking at. We don't see a world where we're going to be insourcing all of these activities, because I think our partners are better suited to do it. And I think they have better ability to hire the key talent needed for that. So you won't see us doing it in all areas. We're going to be very purposeful and thoughtful on it. And then as far as your question on retail media partners, I think you think about it, I think what every retail company is evolving towards is some notion of being a media company as part of being an omni-channel player. And we welcome that. I think there's a better return of investment for us investing a single dollar in a retailer media, which leads to a transaction. We're fully supportive of it. I think there, our only push would be, let's make sure the ROI is robust. We can validate that so that the dollar we spend on any other above the line media is equivalent to the dollar we're spending on a retail media channel. I think that's our only, and a lot of our partners are doing that. They're opening up some of their data so that we can track that and we can actually track transaction. So we're excited about the journey ahead.
Got it. And maybe at some point, a more neutral agency will actually evaluate that media effectiveness and provide, just like ratings for shows, et cetera, et cetera. I could see that kind of coming along at some point in the future. On just sticking to the retail topic, one more item. There's and there was a Wall Street Journal article about how you also have reduced some of the assortment and SKUs. Many other manufacturers have openly talked about it. But as a marketer, I kind of struggle that if you reduce so much of variety, I do understand, my doctoral work was in choice modeling. So I do know that, if you offer too many choices, then, consumers kind of freeze and don't make the right choices. But if you offer too few choices too, then you're not able to differentiate and innovate and kind of this thing. How do you see the balance, right? Reducing assortment versus innovation, providing the right choices and the right differentiation versus your competition?
That's the $1 million question, right, KK? Well, obviously, during the COVID crisis, our focus was on maximizing throughput of our core SKUs so that make sure our consumers can find our big brands. And we worked with our retail partners to drive operational efficiency, right? Yeah. But now you fast forward 4 months into the crisis here in the US, 95% of our items that we have paused are back on shelves. Because one, they were incremental to start with, they were bringing in new consumers, so we want to go back to it. But it also has given us a time window to go back and look at, are these SKUs actually incremental for both us and the retailer? If not, why are we doing it? And I think that's been a good moment of reflection. And this is what I talked about previously, really thinking through where do we add complexity and why. So we are going back and looking at it. So now a lot of our innovation is going to have a higher hurdle before it gets into the market. So those are the things that we're adjusting, is the incrementality, how big is this innovation? Is it meaningful? What is the role? Is it going to grow category penetration? So these are all a lot of the fundamental questions that we've gone away as we've gotten bigger, right? And now we're going back to some of these fundamentals and questioning it.
That's beautiful. It's a great opportunity to, redraw, if you will, redraw the map and kind of really start from the basics. One final question. What are some of the best practices you have seen of stimulating impulse purchases online, in an online world?
It's a good question, by the way. As you can imagine, through this pandemic, e-commerce is one of the fastest growing channels in almost every single geography. In fact, I'll give you a stat that I was reading. There's going to be 2.3 billion consumers, digital buyers this year. And that's a 7% year-over-year growth, bringing in almost 150 million new consumers coming online, developing new habits. The good news is, I think we've built a differentiated capabilities because we invested ahead of the curve in this particular channel. We've done quite a bit on marketing automation, fulfillment through direct ships, and automated intelligence platform. Specifically on impulse, there are 3 or 4 things we're doing. One, we're looking at how do we use interactive and adaptive technologies to engage the consumer. And that's something that we've been very successful in China. We're now doing that a lot more here in the US. The second is, how would we drive flexible cross-category purchase? Because you no longer have the restriction of the physical aisles having to be adjacent. So how do you leverage that? Third, which we've been very successful, is occasion-based virtual bundling. I know it's something that you couldn't do it in the physical world. Now you can do this in the e-commerce world. Fourth, there's a completely new consumer purchase journey that's going on. You think about here in the US e-commerce, a lot of it is click and collect.
Yeah.
Think about your path to the store, the geolocation, the geo-targeting, and how the brands could play a role when you get to the delivery point, right? So we're looking at that. And the last thing I'll tell you, the neat thing is the ability to do personalized offerings and activation based on your individual purchase history actually opens up a whole unlimited potential that we haven't tapped into prior. So we're actually very optimistic on the role of impulse and what it could play in this e-com world. And we're working with our retail partners to bring some of this technologies and techniques to their omni-channel landscape.
Fascinating, fascinating. Ram, thank you so much for your time. As always, I learn a lot when I talk to you. Appreciate your time and appreciate the partnership. Over to you, John.
Thank you, KK. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Ram and KK. Truly a fascinating conversation. Just a couple of key takeaways that really jumped out at me. Ram, first, your focus on what you described as three vectors or three lenses, and really staying focused on those: the consumer, their ever-changing lens, and how things are being dramatically disrupted. Focusing in on channel, significant disruption there, requiring tremendous agility and simplification in many cases. And then third, the focus on commercial capability and evolving your commercial capabilities to meet those evolving consumer and channel demands. Clearly, the underpinning data, technology, and analytics is playing a critical role at not only how you address these COVID times, but well beyond. I thought it was fascinating, your comment about the risk of moving too slow and how we really must embrace agility and being nimble, both from a planning as well as a resource allocation perspective. I thought your perspective around accelerating decision-making and really taking an honest look at how you embrace and extend that speed with which you guys have been operating during this pandemic. How do you make that really kind of a long-lasting operating principle? I thought your example around your direct-to-consumer sites is really a powerful example of that rapid action that ultimately will lead to great benefit for your retail partners. I think your perspective around really kind of understanding the role your brands can and should be playing was really quite insightful. And then of course your secret to maintaining edge all around operational excellence, both from a precision perspective as well as from a closed loop measurement perspective. Clearly your retail partners have tremendous faith in your efforts to continue to perform with that level of operational excellence. And we're certainly proud to be a partner of choice to help drive that. Just in closing, some of the things that you talked about relative to impulse purchasing and some of the technologies you guys are looking at, from interactive and adaptive technologies to enhancing cross-category purchasing to delivering personalized shopping experiences, are really, really interesting. So exciting things to come from you and your team for sure. So with that, thanks so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed our conversation, and we'll close it off.
Great questions, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, KK and Ram. Again, that was terrific. For our listeners and viewers at home, this recorded conversation will be available at our website, iriworldwide.com. We hope you'll take an opportunity to review our COVID-19 thought leadership, including valuable reports and a dashboard of economic indicators. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.